What if the thing you're doing for your health is actually making you more unwell? In this super honest behind the scenes session with one of my coaches, I explore my lifelong pattern of overachieving, especially when it comes to movement and recovery. We unpack how control shows up in my workouts, why balance might not be the right goal, and what it means to lead from a place of collaboration and trust rather than fear. This one's for you if you've ever struggled to trust your body or felt guilty for not doing more. My pattern is being control freakish, particularly when it comes to health. If I find something and it clicks with me, I will dive in 110%, and I do everything 110%. I listened to that podcast episode we talked about with one of the sleep scientists who worked at Whoop, and she was talking about, what happens when you don't get enough sleep. She explained her nighttime routine. So I
Mm,
was like, oh, I wonder if I adopted that, what my results would be. I'm two ends of the extreme. So I was like, got to be in bed at 9:15, or I've got to be
mm,
winding down at 9:15. Um, then realised that's no fun. That came at the cost of me then having a social life. So last week and the week before, I flipped the coin. There wasn't a single night where I was in bed before like 12, half 12, which is quite late for me. And I absolutely loved it because Socia had such a great time. But I think that's why I've come down with this. And my body doesn't cope so well with lack of sleep, late nights. The thing that came to me without even having to think about it was balance. I really need to have 7 really late nights in order to experience what it's like relaxing a little bit.
mm. I don't think there is balance. I think there's harmony. So the distinction there is that balance is I need to have an equal amount of this to make sure I cover this, I do this. But really, that's impractical for us. What it is about harmony. So harmony being 80% of my time is going to be focused on this one thing. So then for most people, that will seem like that's off balance, right? Like, here's this thing that you're doing all the time, and here's the other shit that you're doing. But in essence, if you weren't doing that thing 80% of the time, you won't feel fulfilled. So the idea of balance doesn't really exist. What does exist is harmony. Harmony. Where how can I look at it like a Venn diagram with different sized bubbles, circles, where you have this big one, which is overlapping with smaller ones. And so you want, yeah, you want work to feel like play as much as possible. And then all the things that you're doing to take care of yourself are also play. You're looking at the idea of flipping your mindset about certain things as well. It's like, I get to do this as opposed to I have to do this. Enjoy that process, even with the challenge. Even though it brings up challenges, and sometimes like the last point you mentioned is like, I hate this. It's gone beyond the point of enjoyment. What's the point here? It's about words different. Balance versus harmony. I love the nuance in language because so many people would say that's just the same word. They're not, particularly when you visualized it as a Venn diagram, which puts into a picture the idea that balance is about two measures being equal. And there's no way that if one circle on a Venn diagram was bigger than the other, that they wouldn't be balanced. But there can still be harmony. And I love that. If I hadn't spoken to you, I would have been like, I need an equal number of nights in and an equal number of nights out. Is I'm saying that as the words are coming out my mouth, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And then you're also getting into the territory of, does number of hours equal quality of sleep? And it doesn't. I've woken up the next morning feeling better, having had fewer hours but better quality sleep than loads of sleep.
Exercise is one of the biggest blocks in my health. When I say I'm going to do a yoga practice, I see in my head the sequence I learned as a student, the sequence I've learned to teach, and the one I teach now. My head's that's yoga. That's how yoga should be.
Mm.
I've also experienced that's not true because the best yoga practice I know I can give my body is the one it's asking for. I'm getting more aware of it. It's this need for it to be a certain way. It's my worst form of sabotage because ironically, the thing that suffers is my health because I end up pushing the mindset and the pattern I'm battling.
Mm.
Is it's got to be a certain way. Therefore, I need to push to make it a certain way, even if it doesn't feel right. The other way it shows up is we'll get into a session and I'll be like, oh, I wonder what Gurinder's like got in store for me today. You just go with the moment. But sometimes it's not how I've envisioned it, or I've got an outcome in mind for how I'm going to feel or the results I'm going to get afterwards. And in my head, the equation doesn't add up. So what we've done, 1 + 2, does not equal what's in my head, which is 3.
Mhm.
On waste mental energy and therefore emotional energy, which I could be using doing productive stuff in my life, on thinking about that and then reminiscing over that. I'm a control freak by nature. I'm sure we all are, but I'm very willing to put both hands up and say, that's me, that's what I'm working on. And that's how it shows up.
I'm reading in between the lines. I might be wrong, but you're thinking I need to be absolutely perfect all the time. It's like, no, you don't. You're committed to the process, but you just need to know that there's going to be days where it's not going to be completely achievable. Nothing needs to be perfect. And I haven't thought about it in a while, but it's just come back to me now. I think Tom Robbins is an author. It was stay committed to your decisions, but stay flexible in your approach. It's so simple, right? And when you hear it, it sounds so profound and simple at the same time. You're committed to achieving this thing, and how you achieve that thing is kind of sliding. So you just need to be a little bit better than the day before. That's all it is. So you show up with absolute commitment, but you follow those rules of that 80-20 principle in the execution. It's like 80% of the time, I know I'm going to perform this, I'm going to do this, and it's going to be all good. And about 20% where marginal return from that isn't that great. And also I can just go easy. I don't have to push that much on this particular thing. So does that make sense?
I think the distinction there is super important. Commitment and consistency are very different, and I've just been equating those two and basically a blanket 110 over everything.
So going 110% into whatever you want to do is better than going 80%, right? So it's going 110% in, having that commitment, then being like, but I need to be 80% consistent. You can be 110% in on being 80% consistent. You know what I mean?
I would love to get your take on the pushing nature. Last week we were doing tool kneeling with the shoulder press and I was wobbling all over the place and you had me stable, but a voice in my head was like, what's the point in this if Gurinder has to hold me stable and I'm not enjoying it and my form's crap? It's like I've gone past the point of, I don't want to say comfort because I know it's about being uncomfortable, but I've actually gone past the point of enjoyment. Like I've stopped enjoying this. As ridiculous as that might sound. And I'm like wobbling or I'm unstable and my form slips. And I'm like, what do those extra 2 actually mean? Who put the number 10 on there type of thing? And what does it matter if it's 8 rather than 10? That's the narrative. That's the conversation I'm having with myself. Sometimes maybe with you, but I won't say it out loud.
Right.
The
avatar in your head. This is where the change is happening. So it doesn't feel good. I'm not enjoying this, but I'm doing an exercise which is good for my body, and it is learning how to do it. It's not that Gurinder's putting me through something which it has no idea how to freaking execute it, and it will never understand how to execute it. It will learn how to execute it, and it will get better at it, and the position will mean that the knock-on effect on the body is to have better positioning of the pelvis, of the hips, of the knees, etc., etc., through a range of different movements, which will mean that I protect those joints in my back, etc., etc. So all that kind of stuff goes into it. That's where I found a mantra is quite helpful, whether it's strength training, whether it's rehabilitation, like that is like you're at that point where it doesn't feel good. Just say to yourself, this is where the change happens. You push through that and you built a great layer of foundation, and then you move beyond that. And there'll be something else you don't enjoy, but it gets to the point where you don't enjoy it. But again, it's where the change happens. And so it's an interesting thing. Like this is where strength training in this instance is something that is quite revealing about character, about what's good for us, what's not good for us. Because people often, you're shying away from that point where you get to somewhere uncomfortable. and it feels, okay, this is the point now I should stop. But actually, that's the period where you need to continue, right? And you push through that point, because it's not that point where it's so uncomfortable that you can't do the thing, and it's dangerous for you. It's at the point where you're being challenged, your current skill level versus the challenge that you're at. It's just beyond what you're currently capable of, and that's the place we always want to try and be. And then that's where you create a bigger boundary for your capacity level. So that's one way which helps you to go from I'm not enjoying this to I see the value in this, and therefore it will.
I'm going to pick up on what you said about there's no danger,
Mm.
and contradict you in order to agree with you, and I'll explain why. This comes from spending 3 years neck deep in inner work. I got to rep number 6, 7, 8. It was starting to feel impossible. It's got past the point of enjoyment. And that's past comfort zone or the safety zone, because I'm used to enjoying what I feel good at. And there is a very thin line, and I came over that line and I stopped feeling good. But inner work basically teaches that we all have ultimately a story or a narrative that we've told ourselves. My story or my narrative has always been I'm not good enough, or I'll never be good enough. That point between rep 7 and 8 or 8 and 9, the story kicks in and there's a voice in my head again saying you're not good enough and you're never going to be good enough. And you say there is no danger, because logically I knew there was no physical danger, but the danger for me was stepping over into somewhere where I didn't feel safe because I didn't feel good enough. I'm actually stepping over now from my comfort zone into something else. The danger is what the mind plays out, and the mind's primary role is to protect us from danger. You were like, you weren't in danger. That's not how I felt, because my mind was playing out all the worst things that could have happened, even though they were so unlikely. Hurting myself, or not being able to finish the set, dropping the weight, looking like an idiot, feeling like an idiot, most importantly, bursting into tears, which I didn't, and I was absolutely determined not to do. But I agree with you, because there was no danger. It's just that I was stepping into a zone that I hadn't been in before. I'm an overachiever and I'm very used to being the best at what I do or very good at what I do. And suddenly I'm like, oh gosh, I'm actually really struggling at this. That's dangerous territory for me.
It's actually putting yourself back into that place where there is perceived danger and making yourself realize it's actually safe as well. And then so when you do that, your boundary is shifted of what's dangerous for you and what's safe for you, and in a good way, positive. So we don't give ourselves enough credit for stuff like that, where we are challenging ourselves and it feels like such a small thing, but we need to celebrate the fact that actually it was quite big for us on all these different levels. It's a collaborative thing as well, right? So if you're envisioning a certain thing, make it obvious as well. So just like literally explicitly say, oh, I'm feeling like I could go 1,000,000 miles an hour today. That way we're better off being on the same page about that. And then we discuss whether it was appropriate for you or not at the end of the session. Was it a good session? Do you feel energized? Do you feel depleted? Do you feel better than when you came in, et cetera, all that kind of stuff, because it's important feedback. So if you're like, I'm envisioning that it's going to be more like this, then okay, cool. Then we'll go with that. And because ultimately, yes, there is a program in place, but I also have to match where you're at on a given day. So just bring that up. I'm going to guide you through everything, but it's also based on what you've got for you on a given day, right?
Absolutely. It's good for me to be able to let go, because someone else has got me supported. When I told you about the trying to work things around my cycle, I'm actually realizing now that I came at that because it was very new to me, with such a rigidity in my head. I was working out with this fear that if it didn't fit inside a certain box, that like
the whole session was either doing me harm or wasn't worth it. I was so nervous, frightened to get to my edge because I was scared of making myself feel ill. That was a massive fear mechanism thing. But I'm in a very different place now, and I really appreciate that. I definitely want to stay collaborative in that way.
And sometimes it might be a case of, let's just see what happens. We start training, and then I look at you, and even though you might think I don't have it in me, I can look at you and be like, I think you should push it a little bit. Give yourself that chance. So we might not always agree on where you're at. So it's just about seeing what happens.
I've got 3 priorities in my life, which are my family and friends, my health, and my business, but it's my passion, really. I have only just recently realized that when I start the week, I was giving myself, for each of my things that I'm working on at the moment, all my projects, I was giving myself so many areas to focus on. Every week I've got to have 3 priorities and 3 different things that I'm working on.
Priority means there's only one thing. Technically speaking, there's only one thing that you can actually do, that you're putting on a priority.
Priority exists in its singular form. The inner work has taught me the mind can only focus on one thing at once, which is why I said earlier, I'm a terrible multitasker, and I take my hat off to people who can do it. I can only focus on one thing, and I do genuinely believe we'll get far less done than if we just focused on one and put 110% commitment behind it.
What's implied with multitasking is that you're doing several things at once. You're never doing several things. It's actually just high-level task switching. So people can get very good at task switching, but you are diluting your attention. You're taking attention away from one thing, putting it into the next thing, and away from that and putting it into the next thing in very quick succession. There's always a giant cost to that as well, because to get into an attentive mode takes actual effort as well.
This conversation shifted something really big for me. If you're in a healing process of any kind, whether that's physical, emotional, or hormonal, start asking yourself, am I chasing perfection here, or am I actually practicing trust? I'd really love to know what landed for you from the video, so drop a comment, hit subscribe for more, share it with someone who you think pushes a little too hard sometimes, and don't forget to join my MEN1 community via the link below if you want to have more conversations that, like this one, help make you feel empowered.